Hey, what's up, guys? Okay, so Black Clover chapter 276 is out, and this is one of those chapters where Tabata took a fight that I really wasn't all that invested in, and by the end of the chapter had me hyped for it and excited to read next week's chapter when it hopefully continuing on with that fight. Now, if you haven't read the chapter yet, I do want to say before you watch this video, before you watch any video on the chapter, go read it for yourself because this is one of those chapters that you do not want to be spoiled to. Okay, so the entire chapter focuses on the rematch between Yuno with Langris there to help him out versus Zeno. And I had been very vocal about this fight going into the rematches, going into like the idea that we would begin the three rematches between Dante and Asta, Vanica and Noelle, and Yuno versus Zeno. And this was a fight that I was the least excited about because when it came down to it, I believe that there was no real believable way, especially how Zeno whooped Yuno's ass one-sidedly in her first fight, that 3-4 days later, Yuno could believably get a rematch and actually stand toe to toe with Zeno. And I mean, yeah, the same arguments could be made when it comes to Asta and Noelle's rematches with Vanica and Dante, but those fights were a little bit different than Yuno's fight with Zeno. Because when it comes to Noelle, she almost won her fight against Vanica at the very end there. She pushed herself far enough that she gained the power she needed, or proved that she already had the power she needed to land a fatal blow on Vanica. And if it wasn't for Vanica going into what we believe is her Devil Union form, she possibly would have landed a fatal blow on Vanica. So now we've already proven that Noelle has the power to potentially take down Vanica. Now, of course, there's obviously a big power gap between Vanica and her Union form versus Noelle, but we know that Noelle's also getting training from the elves during these 3 days to learn ultimate magic. Plus, possibly even more so than the Spirit Guardians and Lord Boutica, the elves would know how to use natural mana, so they could actually teach her new techniques and new ways to absorb natural mana and use that in her own abilities that the Spirit Guardians and Lord Boutica possibly didn't know about, which could also increase her power. And then when it comes to Asta, we already saw him technically defeat Dante. Sure, he was working alongside Yami to do it, but he still technically defeated him already. And he did that prior to even knowing how to properly tap into the power of his devil, which we spent the last few chapters focusing on him learning how to do. So Tabata actually gave us a lot more reasons to believe that Noelle and Asta would stand a better chance of fighting toe-to-toe and possibly defeating Vanica and Dante than he did with Yuno, because when it came to Yuno, we didn't really have any actual details of what his training was. The only real details he actually gave us to Yuno getting a power-up for this rematch was Belle saying that she was storing up mana back in chapter 263, I believe, it was actually chapter 264. But that's pretty much it. And then we cut ahead a few chapters and we see Yuno, after training for 3 days, is able to put some large craters on the side of a mountain without the help of Belle. But again, we don't really see any training from him. We just see kind of the results of it. And really, those results aren't that impressive. And then we get a little bit of a hint of him training with Langris on how to fight against spatial mages. But you know what? I gotta admit, Tabata actually proved me wrong with this chapter because, man, once Yuno summoned Belle, which, by the way, I really love the redesign that Tabata gave her for this chapter. I like the new outfit she has. She has kind of like a midriff thing going on, and she has longer hair. It actually kind of looks like she might be a little bit older. Like, over these past 3 days of just basically absorbing more mana, seemingly kind of aged her a little bit. Because at first she seemed, I would say, probably like 14, 15. But after this chapter, I would say she looks like she's around like 18 to 21. Of course, she's obviously a lot older than that, but still, when it comes to appearance-wise, I would say that's what she looks like now. But once he summons her, that is when the chapter really kicks off, because we get to see Yuno activate his brand new Spirit Dive form. Spirit Dive, Spirit of Erases, and man, this redesign for his Spirit Dive form looks incredible. He looks completely, like he really does, now that we know that Yuno is the rightful heir to the Spade Kingdom, he really has that complete regal, kingly look with the Spirit Dive form. Because for one thing, his crown is no longer a half crown; it is full crown now. He's wearing a kind of like a cloak or like a cape that you would expect. Like the king of the Clover Kingdom wears, something similar to that. And he just really looks completely regal. He has a brand new weapon instead of it being like that wind sword. It looks more like a spear now. Like I said, it is incredible redesign, and I cannot wait to see more of it, especially when it gets animated. I cannot wait to see how it looks in the anime. And man, once Yuno transforms into the Spirit Dive form, he is just a powerhouse. He literally goes up to Zeno, like literally just walks through Zeno's attacks, no problem. And then basically, once he gets close to Zeno, kind of just mocks him. It is actually really funny. I can't wait to actually get a real dialogue because the fan translation wasn't really that great. But once we actually get to see Yuno actually get up to Zeno, he walks up to him, says a smart line, and then just one-shots him in the chapter. Like, literally, it looks like Zeno or Yuno put a hole through Zeno's chest in the chapter. Now, as excited as I was when it came to this chapter, I had to reread it because it didn't really make sense how got this kind of power. Like, how did he go from being completely one-sided, getting his ass whooped by Zeno the last time they fought, to 3 to 4 days later being able to one-shot him in the form that Zeno completely whooped his ass in? But the chapter actually gave us a reasoning that actually makes sense in the universe that I feel like a lot of fans are going to be a little bit disappointed by and feel like it's a cop out, but it does actually make sense with Yuno's character and actually explains the reason why he's actually been able to gain such immense power-ups over short periods of time throughout the entire series. And that is because Yuno is loved by Mana. And you know what? I had actually forgotten about the fact that Yuno actually was one of the few characters in the series who was completely loved by Mana. Because we already know how powerful that can actually make a character. We saw the fact that Lick, by being loved by Mana, how incredibly powerful and strong he was. And Yuno, obviously being a reincarnation of his son, would technically also be loved by Mana. And we've already had prior examples to that. Literally every time Yuno gained a power-up over a short period of time throughout the series, it's actually because of the fact that he's loved by Mana, which pretty much makes him a genuine genius in the Black Clover universe. So basically he can gain power-ups over a shorter period of time and a lot easier than other characters. And again, I feel like a lot of people are going to call this a cop-out when it comes to Yuno gaining the power-up he needed in order to fight toe-to-toe with Zeno. But you gotta remember, we don't actually see Zeno use his Devil Union form just yet. He's basically just using the same level of dark form that Asta and Vanica were using prior to them actually figuring out, or prior to them revealing their Devil Union forms. So we haven't seen his uniform yet, so we know that he actually has a lot more power than he's letting on right now. So again, next chapter or the next few chapters, we're going to see Zeno actually get back up, and he's going to be a lot stronger of an opponent for Yuno to face off again. So it's actually not going to be that easy of a fight for Yuno. He's not going to be able to just keep on walking up to Zeno and just one-shotting him the way he did in this chapter. Now, even though it actually is going to end up being a lot harder of a fight for Yuno, we still haven't seen the results of Langris's training yet. We haven't really seen exactly what he's now capable of 6 months after the time skip. And since we don't really know anything about the training that Langris did over the past 6 months, like where he went or what kind of new abilities he gained, he could end up being a sleeper hit when it comes to Yuno actually getting the victory over Zeno. And we still have Nozel, who's going to eventually show up in order to help them out once he defeats the Dark Apostles he stayed behind to fight. So once the three of them team up, I think even when Zeno activates his Devil Union form, we will see the three of them actually manage to defeat him. Now, I actually really found it funny the way that Zeno reacted once he saw Yuno, because the first thing he says to Yuno is, "Didn't I kill you already?" And the look he gives Yuno, and the demeanor he has in the beginning of the chapter, is more of like a look of annoyance than it is worry or fear that they actually might get in the way of his plan. It's more like when when there's a fly in your room just like buzzing around, it's like you're more annoyed by the fact that it's there than you are afraid of it, and you just kind of want to quickly get rid of it so you can go about your day. It's kind of the way that Zeno reacts for a majority of the chapter when he's fighting off against Yuno and Langris, because he really isn't all that worried about them. Once he actually sees what they're capable of in the beginning of the chapter, he's like, oh, well, you guys aren't really a threat. And he easily is taking care of them in the beginning. Like, literally, every attack they throw at him is doing no effect. We see that Yuno tries to use his wind magic on him. Zeno blocks with his bone magic, which we end up finding out from Yuno. And I think this might be a mistranslation from the fan translator. But Yuno says that he mostly uses bone magic as a defensive mechanism, which really, we haven't really seen that from Zeno's prior fights. I mean, yeah, we've seen Zeno basically use it to defend himself against Yuno's attacks before, but the way that Yuno worded it in the chapter made it seem like that he only uses bone magic for defense, and that spatial magic was actually his main source of attacking, which really isn't true, because we really haven't seen, prior to this chapter, Zeno using spatial magic to do anything besides really transport himself from one place to the other. Now, that being said, we actually get to see Zeno use his spatial magic in some interesting ways in this chapter, because once Langris actually goes to attack him, Zeno blocks all Langris' attacks by putting them in like little cubes. And those cubes actually do nullify Langris' spatial magic, but it's different than the way we've seen before back when like Finral fought him during the Roll Knight selection exam. Because the way it's explained in this chapter is that any sorcerer mana that gets put inside those cubes gets dominated by Zeno's mana. So it kind of just like disrupts it and disperses it. So it's kind of similar to the way that Letterly's compass magic works, where anything that's inside her compass, any sorcerer mana that's inside her compass, gets nullified to a certain extent. And we actually see Zeno use it on a much larger scale in the chapter, where he basically encompasses the entire room that they're in one of those cubes, so that any of their attacks will basically be nullified, so that his mana has the dominance over everything, and that he's the only one that can really do any damage to them during the chapter. Now, what's really interesting about this giant cube that Zeno uses in the chapter, and this might end up being just like an error on the fan translator part, but he doesn't call it a mana zone, which usually a large area of effect magic like that usually is a mana zone ability. So the fact he's actually able to do something like that without it being a mana zone is very interesting and very impressive on Zeno's part, and I guess more on his Devil's part, which we still have not been revealed who his devil is and what it looks like. And I have a feeling that since Tabata's been waiting so long to reveal who Zeno's devil is, that this devil is actually going to be very important to the story, or have a very large impact on the story, and that's why he's holding off on the reveal just yet. Okay, so that is pretty much all that happened in this week's chapter. Now, I actually just thought of something right as I was getting ready to end this video, and that is that the giant cube that Zeno uses in this chapter to completely nullify Yuno and Langris's mana, I think we've actually seen him use this ability on a smaller scale prior to this. I think back to the beginning of the time skip when him and Yuno fought the first time. I think in that moment where we actually get to see a silhouette of Zeno's devil, Zeno was actually using this ability back then. Because if you look back to that chapter, he does have Yuno trapped in what looks like a cube. So it could be that Zeno actually was using that ability in that moment, kind of just to like show off exactly how much stronger he is than Yuno at that moment. But anyway, guys, like I said, that is all that happened in this week's chapter. Now, surprisingly enough, I am really invested in actually finding out how this fight's going to play out and seeing more of this fight between Yuno and Zeno. And I'm hoping that Tabata does not cut away from this to start off the other two fights between the other two the other two Dark Triad members in the next few chapters, and we actually get to continue this fight at least for another chapter or two. Because again, I am really invested in this fight now. Tabata, I'm getting names confused. Tabata has really made me care about this fight and actually made me really interested in seeing exactly how it plays out. So I'm hoping we don't cut away from it just yet. We get to continue on with it for a little while and then cut away to the other fights after a few chapters. But that's going to be it for me, guys. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, drop me a like, subscribe to the channel. I would greatly appreciate it. And comment down below your thoughts on Yuno's brand new Spirit Eye form. Were you excited to see it? Because I know I was. I mean, the way he just one-shotted Zeno in this chapter, man. Tabata knows exactly what he is doing when it comes to these fights. But anyway, that's for the video. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. And I will catch you guys with the next one. Peace.